Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore World War II, all you need to know. A conflict that reshaped the planet. 60 million lives lost. Empires toppled. Nations reborn. From the spark in 1939 to the ashes of 1945, humanity stood at the edge of destruction, and somehow, found a way back. So close your eyes, imagine the crackle of an old radio, and step with us into the most turbulent chapter of modern history. Chapter 1, The Spark of War. The year is 1939. Europe still bears the scars of the Great War. Cities are recovering, people cling to hope, and leaders promise peace. But beneath the calm, storms are brewing. Germany, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, burns with resentment. A man named Adolf Hitler feeds that anger, preaching revival through conquest. Imagine Berlin, flags fluttering, crowds cheering as Hitler's voice echoes across the airwaves. He promises jobs, unity, and pride. But behind every promise lies a plan, one that envisions a continent under Nazi control. Across the Channel, Britain watches warily, while France hopes diplomacy will hold. In August 1939, a shocking pact freezes the world, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement between Germany and the Soviet Union. Hidden within it is a secret clause, an agreement to divide Poland. A handshake between two dictators, Hitler and Stalin, sets the stage for chaos. September 1, 1939. Dawn. German troops pour across the Polish border. Stuka dive bombers scream overhead. Warsaw is engulfed in fire. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, has begun. Within days, Polish defenses crumble under mechanized assault and relentless air raids. 2 days later, Britain and France declare war. The world holds its breath. Children are evacuated from London. Posters read "Keep calm and carry on." The Second World War has officially begun. Yet the full fury of it still lies ahead. In Poland, civilians hide in basements as tanks roll through their streets. Farmers watch their villages burn. The war's first refugees begin to walk, carrying only what they can. For millions, this is the beginning of a nightmare that will last 6 years. And in Berlin, Hitler smiles. His gamble has worked, at least for now. Chapter 2, Europe in Flames. By 1940, the Blitzkrieg machine roars westward. Denmark and Norway fall within weeks. France, confident in its massive Maginot Line, is caught off guard as German tanks sweep through the Ardennes forest. Paris falls in June. The French government surrenders, the Eiffel Tower stands silent under the shadow of the swastika. Britain stands alone. Across the Channel, Hitler plans Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of the British Isles. But first, he must crush the Royal Air Force. The Battle of Britain begins. The summer sky becomes a battlefield. Pilots barely out of their teens duel at 20,000 feet, vapor trails spiraling through the clouds. Winston Churchill's voice carries through the radio, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." Night after night, German bombers rain destruction on London, Coventry, and Liverpool. Families sleep in subway tunnels. Firefighters battle infernos amid falling glass and rubble. Yet the British spirit holds. The Luftwaffe fails to gain air superiority. Hitler postpones the invasion indefinitely. Meanwhile, Italy joins the war on Germany's side. Mussolini dreams of rebuilding the Roman Empire. His troops strike in North Africa and the Balkans, but soon discover that dreams of empire die quickly in desert heat and mountain snow. British and Commonwealth forces fight back fiercely. In Eastern Europe, occupied nations face brutal repression. Jews are forced into ghettos, dissenters vanish. The machinery of terror begins to turn. But resistance movements are also born, ordinary citizens risking everything to sabotage trains, print leaflets, or hide the persecuted. Imagine the fear, and the courage, of those living under occupation. A whispered message, a knock at the door, the choice between silence and rebellion. Europe is ablaze, but embers of hope still glow beneath the ashes. Chapter 3: A World at War. The conflict spreads beyond Europe. Hitler breaks his pact with Stalin and launches Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. 3 million German soldiers surge into the Soviet Union. The Eastern Front becomes a frozen hell. Villages burn. Columns of refugees stretch for miles. Soviet soldiers, unprepared, retreat in chaos. But as winter descends, the German advance slows. Temperatures plunge below -30 degrees Celsius. Engines freeze, soldiers starve. Outside Moscow, Soviet resistance hardens. For the first time, the Nazi war machine stalls. Far away, across the Pacific, another empire is on the move. Japan, already at war in China, seeks dominance over Asia. The United States, though neutral, imposes embargoes on oil and steel. Tensions boil. On December 7, 1941, the world changes forever. At dawn, Japanese planes strike Pearl Harbor. Battleships burn, sailors dive into flaming waters. A day that will live in infamy, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declares. The United States joins the war. The conflict is now truly global. From the deserts of North Africa to the jungles of Burma, from the steppes of Russia to the oceans of the Pacific, millions fight, march, and die. The Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan, seem unstoppable. Yet the Allies, Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and the US, begin to unite their strength. Factories roar with production. Women take up the tools of war, building planes, tanks, and ammunition. Posters proclaim, "We can do it." Science and industry become weapons as powerful as any gun. The tide is slowly beginning to turn. In the occupied territories, resistance grows stronger. Underground newspapers, secret radio transmissions, and sabotage missions keep hope alive. Ordinary people become unsung heroes of freedom. And as the war widens, humanity's endurance is tested beyond measure. Chapter 4: Turning Tides. 1942 marks a crucial turning point. In North Africa, General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, pushes toward Egypt. The Suez Canal and Middle East oil lie within reach. But British forces under Bernard Montgomery meet him at El Alamein. After a brutal battle, Rommel is forced to retreat. Churchill proclaims, "This is not the end, but perhaps the beginning of the end." In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway becomes America's moment of triumph. Outnumbered U.S. carriers ambush the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 of its proudest ships. Japan's expansion halts, the Pacific balance shifts. Island by island, Allied forces begin their long climb toward Tokyo. Back in Europe, the siege of Stalingrad rages. German and Soviet soldiers fight street by street, room by room. Civilians hide in cellars as artillery reduces the city to dust. Winter returns, and the Germans are encircled. In February 1943, the Sixth Army surrenders, Hitler's first catastrophic defeat. Imagine that moment. After years of unstoppable conquest, the Nazi Empire begins to crack. Mothers in Berlin receive telegrams that never mentioned Stalingrad by name, "Only your son will not return." The Allies gain confidence. In July 1943, they invade Sicily, then Italy. Mussolini is overthrown, Italy surrenders. But German troops occupy the north, turning Italy into another battleground. As Allied forces inch forward, Hitler's dream of domination begins to crumble. By 1943, the skies over Germany darken with Allied bombers. Hamburg, Dresden, and Berlin are pounded into ruins. Civilians flee underground shelters as firestorms rage. The war that Germany started now engulfs its own cities in flames. Chapter 5: The Long Road to Liberation. The Allies are ready to strike back at the heart of Nazi-occupied Europe. For years, resistance networks, spies, and soldiers have prepared for this moment. The plan, Operation Overlord, is the largest amphibious invasion in history. Its target, the beaches of Normandy, France. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, paratroopers drop from the night sky. The English Channel roars with thousands of ships. As dawn breaks, Allied forces storm the beaches, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. The sea runs red with blood, but the line holds. Soldiers push inland, step by step, under machine gun fire and exploding shells. Imagine the chaos. Young men, seasick and terrified, leap into the surf as bullets snap around them. Officers shout orders lost in the wind. Medics crawl through sand to reach the wounded. Amid horror, courage burns bright. By nightfall, the Allies have a foothold in France. From that day on, liberation gathers momentum. Town after town is freed. French civilians weep as Allied tanks roll through their streets, tossing flowers to the soldiers. The French resistance emerges from the shadows, guiding convoys, sabotaging bridges, and hunting retreating Germans. The tide of war has turned for good. In the east, the Soviet juggernaut drives relentlessly westward. After the hell of Stalingrad and Kursk, the Red Army pushes through Ukraine, Poland, and the Balkans. Each step forward uncovers atrocities, the mass graves, the ashes, the unimaginable evidence of Nazi genocide. The world begins to understand the full scope of the Holocaust, a horror unlike any in human history. Millions of Jews, Roma, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime are murdered in camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor. The liberation of these camps will soon reveal the darkest truth of all, humanity's capacity for cruelty, and the resilience of those who endured it. Chapter 6: Shadows of the Holocaust. Even as the Allies advance, Europe is haunted by whispers. Refugees tell of camps where smoke rises day and night, of families torn apart, of entire communities vanishing without trace. Many refuse to believe it. How could such evil exist on this scale? Yet the truth is far worse than anyone can imagine. In the forests of Poland and Belarus, survivors hide among the trees. Resistance fighters sabotage trains bound for the camps. Secret reports smuggled to London and Washington describe gas chambers and crematoria. Still, the full horror remains hidden behind barbed wire until liberation. January 1945. Soviet troops reach Auschwitz. They find mountains of shoes, piles of hair, and warehouses of stolen belongings. The gas chambers stand silent, but the smell of death lingers. Out of thousands, only a few hundred survive, emaciated, barely alive. Soldiers weep as they realize what they have found. In Western Europe, American and British forces uncover Buchenwald, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen. General Eisenhower orders everything to be filmed, fearing no one will believe it later. Survivors stare into the cameras, faces of ghosts, but eyes burning with a need to be seen, to be remembered. The Holocaust claims over 6 million Jewish lives and millions more victims, political prisoners, intellectuals, people with disabilities, Roma, and countless others. It is genocide on a scale the world had never known. And yet, amid unimaginable loss, stories of bravery shine through. Oskar Schindler, who saved more than 1,000 Jews by employing them in his factories, Irina Sendler, who smuggled children out of the Warsaw Ghetto, Raoul Wallenberg, who issued protective passports in Budapest. These are the lights that pierce the darkness. As the Allies close in, Nazi Germany begins to collapse from within. Cities lie in ruins. The people, once caught in fanaticism, now hide in cellars as the front lines approach. Hitler's empire is crumbling, and with it, his delusion of a 1,000-year Reich. Chapter 7: The Fall of the Third Reich. By April 1945, the end is near. Soviet artillery pounds Berlin relentlessly. The once mighty capital of the Reich is a wasteland of rubble and smoke. In the Führerbunker, beneath the shattered city, Adolf Hitler rants to his remaining generals, denying the inevitable. His empire has turned to dust. Above ground, chaos reigns. German soldiers surrender in droves. Civilians flee west, desperate to escape the Red Army. In the distance, Allied and Soviet troops meet at the Elbe River, a symbolic moment of unity. The world watches as fascism dies in its own fire. On April 30, 1945, Hitler takes his own life. His closest followers do the same. A week later, Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war in Europe is over. Streets fill with laughter and tears, church bells ring for the first time in years. Strangers embrace. The nightmare is ending, but the wounds will last generations. Imagine the feeling of that day. Relief, disbelief, sorrow. For every victory celebration, there are empty chairs at the table. Every soldier returning home knows that peace has come at a price that can never truly be repaid. In the wake of Germany's defeat, the world begins to reckon with the scale of destruction. Entire cities must be rebuilt. Millions are displaced. The Nuremberg trials soon follow, seeking justice for crimes against humanity. The principle that emerges, never again, becomes a moral cornerstone of the modern world. But as Europe begins to heal, another storm continues to rage across the Pacific. Chapter 8: The Pacific Inferno. While victory spreads through Europe, the war in the Pacific reaches its peak. Japan's empire still spans from Burma to the Philippines, from China to the Pacific Islands. The fighting is brutal, savage jungles, suffocating heat, and a foe that refuses to surrender. At Iwo Jima, American Marines climb Mount Suribachi under relentless fire. The famous flag raising becomes a symbol of hope, but the cost is staggering, nearly 30,000 lives lost for a small volcanic island. At Okinawa, the toll is even higher, civilians caught between armies, kamikaze pilots diving from the sky, entire villages obliterated. Meanwhile, Japanese cities endure relentless bombing. Tokyo burns in a single night of firestorms, killing more than 100,000 people. The war has become total, civilian and soldier alike trapped in the same inferno. By mid-1945, Allied planners face a grim choice: invade Japan, risking millions of casualties, or deploy a new and terrible weapon, the atomic bomb. A creation born from science and fear, tested in the deserts of New Mexico, its power is beyond comprehension. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay releases its deadly cargo over Hiroshima. In a blinding flash, the city disappears. 3 days later, Nagasaki suffers the same fate. The mushroom clouds rise as symbols of both victory and horror, the birth of the nuclear age. Japan, devastated and broken, surrenders on September 2, 1945. The Second World War is finally over. From the deck of the USS Missouri, General Douglas MacArthur declares the dawn of peace. Yet the silence that follows is heavy, an uneasy quiet over a world forever changed. Chapter 9: The Cost of Victory. The numbers are staggering. More than 60 million dead. Entire cities erased. Families shattered beyond repair. The Second World War is not just a story of battles and borders, it's a story of ordinary lives caught in extraordinary tragedy. Europe lies in ruins. The Soviet Union has lost 27 million people. China's losses approach 20 million. Germany, Japan, Poland, all reduced to rubble. Across the world, people begin the slow, painful process of rebuilding. Refugees return to find homes gone, towns destroyed, loved ones missing. In the United States, the war ends the Great Depression but ushers in a new era of global responsibility. Soldiers return as heroes, but also as witnesses to horror. In the Soviet Union, victory comes at immense human cost, and Stalin's grip on power tightens further. The seeds of a new global rivalry are already being sown. Colonies across Asia and Africa look to the war's end as a moment of awakening. Nations that fought under imperial banners begin to demand independence. The struggle against tyranny has inspired movements for freedom everywhere. The world stands at a crossroads, scarred by violence, but filled with determination never to repeat it. Chapter 10: Aftermath of War. The guns fall silent, but the echoes of war still thunder across the world. 1945 is not a clean ending, it's a deep breath after a scream. Cities lie in ruins, nations in mourning. Soldiers wander home through wreckage that barely resembles their birthplace. Europe is broken, but the human spirit begins the slow climb toward healing. In Berlin, Soviet and American troops share cigarettes amid the rubble of the Reichstag. In London, rationing continues as people rebuild brick by brick. In Paris, the lights come back on, illuminating faces that have known too much darkness. Across Asia, millions of prisoners of war and forced laborers begin their long journeys home, many never finding their families again. For the survivors of the Holocaust, the end of the war does not mean peace. Camps are liberated, but liberation brings its own trauma. Where do you go when your home, your family, and your community no longer exist? Displaced persons camps spring up across Europe. The search for identity and belonging begins anew. In the Pacific, American soldiers return home changed forever. Many cannot speak of what they saw on Iwo Jima, in the jungles of the Philippines, or beneath the atomic clouds of Hiroshima. The images burn silently in their minds. Victory has come, but at an unbearable cost. Imagine being alive in those first post-war months. The world feels both empty and alive again. Children laugh for the first time without fear of sirens. Bread tastes like a miracle. But the grief is never far away, it lingers in photographs on mantels, in the quiet of every sunset, in the silence between songs on the radio. Amid the devastation, leaders begin to ask, how do we prevent this from ever happening again? Chapter 11, The United Nations and a New Hope. Out of the ashes of war rises a fragile dream, a world united not by conquest, but by cooperation. In October 1945, representatives from 50 nations gather in San Francisco to create the United Nations, a forum dedicated to peace, human rights, and international dialogue. The scars of war shape its founding principles. The UN Charter opens with words of hope, "We the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war." It's more than a political document, it's a promise, written by those who have seen humanity at its worst and refuse to accept that darkness as inevitable. For the first time, global institutions are established to protect peace and dignity: the International Court of Justice, the World Health Organization, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that will follow in 1948. The world has learned that war cannot simply be won, it must be prevented. Yet, peace proves fragile. The same year the United Nations is born, old allies begin to drift apart. The Soviet Union tightens control over Eastern Europe, while the United States and its partners rebuild the West through the Marshall Plan. The Cold War is beginning, and with it, a new kind of global tension. Still, for many, the idea of a united world brings hope. War survivors dedicate their lives to rebuilding. Nations once divided by battle now sit together at the same table, trying, imperfectly, to speak instead of shoot. The lesson of the United Nations is not that peace comes easily. It is that peace must be built, protected, and renewed every single day. Chapter 12, The Dawn of the Cold War. The victory against fascism gives way to a new standoff: capitalism versus communism. The United States and the Soviet Union emerge as superpowers, their alliance forged in necessity now fractured by ideology. The world divides once more, not by trenches and front lines, but by nuclear arsenals and iron curtains. In 1947, Winston Churchill warns the world, from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Europe becomes the chessboard of a new geopolitical struggle. Berlin, once the heart of Hitler's empire, is now split in two: East and West, freedom and control. The atomic bomb, once seen as a weapon of victory, now hangs over humanity as a threat of extinction. The arms race begins. Propaganda, espionage, and fear take the place of open combat. The war that was meant to end all wars instead births an age of uncertainty. But amid the tension, progress also emerges. The technological leaps born from wartime research, radar, jet engines, computing, accelerate human civilization. Out of necessity, humanity learns faster, builds stronger, and dreams bigger. The same drive that once built bombs now reaches for the stars. In many ways, the Cold War is the ghost of World War II, a reminder that peace without understanding is only an intermission. The scars of the 1940s continue to shape the decades that follow. Chapter 13, Rebuilding Lives, Rebuilding Nations. The late 1940s and 1950s become an era of reconstruction. In Western Europe, the Marshall Plan injects billions into recovery. New roads, factories, and schools rise from the rubble. For the first time in years, there's talk of a brighter future. The people who endured the unimaginable begin to rebuild their worlds, one brick, one memory at a time. In Japan, General MacArthur oversees a complete transformation. The old empire is dismantled. A new constitution grants democracy and women's rights. Factories shift from weapons to industry, from destruction to innovation. Within a generation, Japan will rise again, not as a conqueror, but as a powerhouse of peace and technology. Germany, too, faces reinvention. The Nuremberg trials confront the horrors of the Nazi regime head-on, ensuring that justice is recorded in human history. A new Germany emerges, humbled, democratic, and determined to never return to its dark past. For survivors, rebuilding is personal. Families separated by war search for one another through Red Cross lists. Letters cross borders that were once battlefields. Hope returns in small, human ways, a reunion at a train station, a song on the radio, the laughter of children born into a world that promises to do better. Imagine the resilience it takes to start again after losing everything. The courage to plant a seed where the soil still smells of smoke. This is the quiet heroism of peace, the strength to move forward. And as nations heal, humanity begins to remember, not only the destruction, but the unity forged in adversity. Chapter 14, Remembering and Reckoning. Time begins to pass, but memory refuses to fade. In the ruins of Auschwitz and Normandy, in Hiroshima and Stalingrad, monuments rise. Names are engraved in stone. The survivors tell their story so the world will not forget. Museums preserve the artifacts, faded uniforms, diaries, ration books, and photographs that freeze human faces in the instant before tragedy. History becomes a teacher, and a warning. The phrase "never again" echoes through generations, a moral compass pointing away from hatred and war. But remembrance is not easy. The war's legacy remains tangled in politics, pain, and identity. Nations debate responsibility, veterans carry guilt as well as pride. Artists, writers, and filmmakers grapple with the impossible task of portraying the unthinkable. Yet through it all, storytelling becomes the bridge between past and present. Every year, ceremonies mark VE Day, VJ Day, and Holocaust Remembrance Day. The world pauses to reflect, not to glorify war, but to honor those who endured it, and to remind ourselves that peace is fragile. Imagine standing in silence as the last survivors of that era speak. Their voices tremble, but their message is clear: we cannot undo the past, but we can learn from it. Memory, if kept alive, is the world's most powerful defense against repetition. The war that engulfed the world becomes more than history, it becomes a mirror, showing us both the depths of cruelty and the heights of courage humanity can reach. Closing summary: the war that changed humanity forever. When you step back and look at the world before 1939 and the world after 1945, you realize something profound: humanity was never the same again. Before the war, the world still believed in empires, in absolute power, in the illusion that violence could create order. After the war, those illusions burned away. The devastation was too great, the losses too personal, the truths too painful to ignore. 70 million lives were lost. Entire cities erased. Families torn apart, never reunited. Yet, amid the ashes, a new vision of humanity began to emerge. The world learned that survival is not victory unless it's shared by all. That progress is meaningless without compassion. That silence in the face of evil is complicity. World War II was not only a clash of armies, it was a test of what it means to be human. It showed us both the abyss of cruelty and the heights of courage. It gave us stories of ordinary men and women who did extraordinary things, who hid families in attics, who stood against tyranny, who fought not for glory but for the simple right to live free. It also forced us to look inward, to question how prejudice, fear, and blind obedience can turn neighbors into enemies. The lessons of that time still whisper to us today, in every conflict, every act of hate, every moment when we choose apathy over empathy. When you visit the beaches of Normandy, the ruins of Hiroshima, or the silent halls of Auschwitz, you can feel it, the weight of history pressing gently on your chest. It's a reminder that peace is not a gift. It's a responsibility. The world we live in now, the freedoms we enjoy, the institutions we rely on, the moral compass that guides our collective conscience, were all forged in those years of fire. Out of the darkest chapter in human history came a fragile, luminous truth: we are capable of terrible things, but we are also capable of redemption. And that's the legacy of World War II, not just a story of destruction, but of rebirth. A story not about how humanity fell, but how it found the strength to rise again. This has been World War II, all you need to know. Thank you for joining us, and for listening to the stories that continue to shape our world.